Good evening. I hope you are ready because once I start sharing what happened at Eastern State Penitentiary, there may be no turning back. You might feel an icy tingle creeping up your arms or a suffocating weight pressing against your lungs. You might sense a presence hovering just over your shoulder, even though when you glance back, you see nothing at all. Please, stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to tell you still makes my skin crawl every time I remember it. I first learned about Eastern State Penitentiary from a late-night social media post. Someone tagged me in a photograph of its decaying, fortress-like exterior with the caption, "Dare you to visit?" My curiosity flared. I showed the image to my friend Mia. She is the type of person who hunts down every rumored haunted site during Halloween season. True to form, she immediately booked tickets for us. That same evening, while walking home under the neon lights of Philadelphia's busiest streets, I noticed something that made me taste copper on my tongue. A tall man stood beneath a flickering street lamp, his neck rotating in slow mechanical arcs. His lips were parted just enough to reveal a sliver of pale gum tissue, and his eyes, they looked too wide, as though they had been stretched from the inside. He never blinked. The air around him smelled stale, like the interior of an abandoned building. And when I saw him lift one hand, trembling, bent at an odd angle as though the bones were misaligned, I felt a cold sweat trickle down my spine. I hurried past him, every footstep echoing too loudly in my ears, but something about his blank stare seemed to follow me all the way home. The day of our tour arrived more quickly than I expected. Mia and I met at a crowded subway station, the screech of wheels on rails reminding me of nails dragged across tin. Mia was buzzing with excitement, constantly tapping her phone to record the moment. Meanwhile, my stomach felt twisted, as if I had swallowed shards of glass. She teased me. "You are not getting cold feet already, are you?" I smiled, but my voice came out thinner than I intended. We surfaced onto the street and looked up at those immense stone walls. Even with the midday sun overhead, the penitentiary's silhouette was so stark, it felt like a shadow had crept into broad daylight. Rough stone edges jutted out like jagged teeth, and a faint odor of moss and rust made the air feel damp. My skin prickled. In that moment, I realized that this place might hold much darker secrets than any ordinary haunted attraction. Once we entered the courtyard, I noticed how unnaturally still the atmosphere felt, despite a few other visitors wandering around. The sunlight was harsh, yet it could not chase away the sense that the walls themselves were watching us. My ears caught fragments of whispered rumors. People spoke of vengeful spirits, apparitions with half-rotted faces. Mia tugged on my jacket, pointing out a dark corner where she thought she saw movement. We stepped closer, but by the time we arrived, there was nothing but a faint odor of decay, like wet cardboard and old meat. As the official tour began, the recorded guide spoke in a polite monotone about the prison's 19th century founding. The voice explained the concept of total solitude as a method to reform inmates, but each word only made my gut clench tighter. I could almost feel the building breathing in time with my anxious heartbeat. They led us into the first cell block, lit only by narrow shafts of sunlight. The air felt colder the moment we crossed the threshold. Rows of iron doors stretched onward, and as we passed each cell, I picked up subtle hints of mildew and something sharper underneath, maybe lingering sweat or stagnant urine. Mia pointed out strange gouges carved into the floor, as though someone had dragged metal across the concrete in rage or despair. I heard a faint rattling like chains being disturbed, then realized nobody else was reacting. My pulse accelerated. I rested a hand on the stone wall, and it was moist, as though the prison itself was perspiring. Looking through the rusted iron bars into one empty cell, I thought I saw a silhouette flicker against the back wall. It was gone in an instant, leaving behind a hush so profound that my own breathing sounded thunderous. We emerged briefly into a narrow courtyard. The sky overhead felt painfully bright, and I had to squint. Mia snapped a few pictures, whispering excitedly that these crumbling walls would get us plenty of online attention. But my attention veered toward a figure at the far side of the courtyard. He was tall, taller than anyone else around, and stood unnervingly rigid, his posture so stiff it made me wonder if his spine had fused. A scab-like patch of skin near his jaw appeared discolored, almost black, and even from a distance I noticed the slow pivot of his neck, left to right, left to right. My stomach twisted. The air tasted metallic, like old pennies in the back of my throat. Mia saw him too, but before she could speak, he vanished behind a broken section of fencing with impossible speed. It felt as though a cold draft followed in his wake, leaving a faint reek of something burnt behind. Mia asked if I was all right, and I forced a laugh, unwilling to admit that I recognized him from that night beneath the street lamp. In one of the main corridors, we found a small exhibit featuring old black and white photographs and recovered artifacts. Mia was engrossed in reading the captions, but my gaze kept drifting to a large layout pinned up behind glass, a schematic of restricted wings. Bold red lines crossed out entire hallways. A note explained these corridors were off-limits due to safety issues, but scrawled next to it was a staff comment. Night shrieks reported. My skin tingled with the knowledge that I had to see these areas, even if it was a terrible idea. At that moment, I caught a whiff of something rancid, like the stench of spoiled meat. Yet nobody else seemed to react. Mia whispered that we should continue with the main tour. I nodded, but part of me was already thinking about how to slip away. As the group moved on, I lagged behind. After confirming nobody was watching, I slipped through a half-open gate leading into a darkened passage. The moment I stepped through, the temperature dropped so abruptly that my breath came out in a shuddering gasp. The light behind me dimmed, replaced by a low hum that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. With each footstep, the stone floor felt like ice seeping through my shoes. Then I heard a faint scraping ahead, like a metal object dragged across concrete. It set my nerves on edge, but instead of retreating, I advanced deeper into the gloom. The corridor was suffocatingly dark. A single blinking fluorescent bulb offered mocking flashes of illumination. Every time it flickered off, I had the fleeting impression of shapes clinging to the ceiling, forms that might have been human had they not been so horribly contorted. When the light blinked back, nothing was there except peeling paint and damp, mold-streaked concrete. The air was thick with the smell of rot. My throat itched with each breath, and I felt a slight burn at the back of my tongue, as if the decay was settling inside me. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed from somewhere ahead, making me jump so badly I dropped my phone. The darkness swallowed the sound of it hitting the floor, and in that moment, I felt a presence so close that the tiny hairs on the back of my neck prickled, as though something had exhaled against my skin. I found a heavy metal door dangling from its hinges and pushed it aside with some difficulty. The room beyond was cluttered with rotting chairs, scattered paperwork, and the stench of mildew so intense I had to press a hand against my mouth. By the weak light of my phone, I scanned a few papers on the floor. One note read, "He smiles when he thinks no one is looking. His jaw cracks, but there is no sound of laughter." My heart hammered as I recalled the figure in the courtyard. The papers went on to describe muffled crying at night, doors slamming on their own, and a suffocating darkness that made people forget the time of day. One sentence ended in a shaky scrawl. "He wants more souls to keep him company." A congealed smear of what looked like dried blood obscured the final words, leaving a coppery tang in the air that made me gag. A rustling noise jerked my attention toward a corner where the shadows pooled. My mouth went dry. Rising from the darkness was a man, or something wearing a man's shape. His clothing looked like it had fused to his flesh, dark stains across his shirt as though fluid had seeped through. His face was painfully elongated, with jaw muscles that looked overstrained, giving him a near-permanent sneer. His eyes were sunken into bruised sockets, the skin around them cracked like old parchment. And there it was, that neck, rotating slowly as if testing each vertebra's limit, a subtle popping echoing off the walls. The air grew stale with every motion, a rancid odor emanating from him. My knees threatened to buckle. In my panic, I tripped over a broken chair, sending debris clattering. By the time I got to my feet, the man was gone. Not a single footstep, not even the slightest shuffle. Just silence, thick and nauseating. My legs were trembling, but I forced them to carry me back into the corridor. Distantly, I heard Mia's voice, muffled, distorted, like she was calling from the other end of a tunnel. I sprinted toward the sound, each step echoing with a hollow thud, as though the walls were drumming my heartbeat back to me. Rounding a corner, I froze. The figure stood at the end of the hallway, his head tilted so far that his right ear almost touched his shoulder. The fluorescent light overhead sputtered, and for a brief second I saw his lips pulled back in an unnerving grin, exposing pale gums and a dark gap where several teeth should have been. My entire body felt numb with shock. The temperature plummeted, and the air gained a sour tang like the smell of rancid eggs. He slowly lifted his hand, fingers bent in angles that made my skin crawl, and pointed directly at me. I nearly screamed but found I had no breath. Instead, I bolted in the opposite direction, ignoring the debris that ripped at my ankles, desperate to reach Mia. After a maze of twisted hallways, a crack of daylight illuminated a door ajar. I burst through it, colliding with Mia so hard we both stumbled. The warm sunlight on my face felt too bright, and for a second, I tasted salt as sweat trickled down my lips. My lungs burned. Mia demanded to know what happened. I could not form a coherent reply, so I babbled something about the figure and these notes. She looked equal parts concerned and frustrated, but I think the raw fear in my eyes convinced her something was truly wrong. That crawling sense of being watched still pressed against my back, as though the figure stood right behind the door, waiting to drag me back into the dark. Mia took hold of my arm, and the warmth of her grip was the only thing tethering me to reality. We rejoined the tour right as it was ending. The official guide delivered a tidy conclusion about how the prison's original philosophy had been abandoned, leading to mental breakdowns among inmates. Yet she did not mention the notes I had found, nor the horrifying figure prowling the restricted corridors. Mia and I hung back, hoping to question another staff member. A gray-haired employee, noticing our disquiet, whispered that some co-workers refused to patrol certain blocks alone, citing disembodied voices and a presence that stared from the corners. Some described seeing a tall man with an unnaturally twisting neck, who would grin in the darkness as if tasting their fear. The staff member's voice trembled with each word, and I could practically smell the anxiety in the air, a sharp tang like adrenaline. When she finished, I felt an icy tremor crawl down my arms. It was almost as though the building itself relished our fear. Outside again, I gasped for fresh air. The sun was sinking behind the penitentiary, casting elongated shadows that seemed to stretch across the courtyard like hungry tendrils. Mia tapped on her phone with trembling fingers, probably posting about our bizarre experience. I could not stop my gaze from drifting to the stone entrance. For the briefest moment, I was convinced I saw him. The same tall figure, just inside the gate, his neck contorted at a sickening angle. A wave of queasiness rolled through me, and I nearly doubled over. When I blinked, he was gone, leaving my surroundings eerily silent. The taste of dread was so strong I could almost chew it, thick and bitter on my tongue. It felt like the prison was whispering, "I know you. You belong to me now." Weeks later, I discovered old newspaper clippings detailing disappearances at Eastern State Penitentiary. Visitors who went off-path and never returned. Employees who ventured into sealed wings for routine checks and vanished without a trace. The official record blamed collapses or hidden pitfalls. None of it explained the twisted figure, the rotting odor, or the suffocating hush that haunted those corridors. Mia refused to talk about it anymore, brushing me off whenever I tried to discuss the old notes. But late at night, when I walk home alone, my mind dredges up that image of his warped grin, the neck rolling side to side, the unnatural angles of those fingers. Sometimes out of the corner of my eye, I catch a glimpse of a tall silhouette by a lamppost or a storefront window, only to find nothing there when I look directly. It makes my mouth go dry, like the moment before a scream. I can sense it. The penitentiary let me leave, but not without a mark. Perhaps it wants me to come back, to finish what it started. I try to joke. If that thing set up a social media account, it would definitely overshadow me with how many souls it could lure. But every time I say it out loud, a cold, crawling sensation spreads across my back. I still see his face in my dreams, that dislocated jaw half open, revealing blackened gums and that taunting grin. I warn you, do not let your guard down, not even for a second. Because these old walls have a hunger, and if they notice you, they may never let you escape again. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you would like to hear more experiences like this, please consider subscribing. Your support means more than you know. And who knows, maybe it will keep that neck-twisting figure from stepping out of the next dark corner you pass.